Welcome to Under the Fig Tree podcast. In today's episode, hosts Reverend Micah Glenn and Reverend Dr. Ben Haupt talk theology and life as they meditate under the fig tree.
What's up? Welcome back to another episode of Under the Fig Tree podcast. Made it through. That's first take. It's not always the first take, everybody, but that was the first take officially. I am your host, Reverend Micah Glenn, Director of Recruitment here at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, joined by co-host Kati Gaschler, Mrs. Kati Gaschler. We're going to figure that out at some point. I do something. I always would say Ben's name differently.
Yeah. Are you going to try to guess my middle name?
It's Denise. I already know it. She is the
Nice.
Recruitment coordinator, works with me and the rest of our team, helping us do stuff and make sure that things get done.
Yeah.
And that we're hospitable and that that you have a great time. So if you ever have visited Concordia Seminary in the last 6 months, or you plan to in the future, and you have a great time, it's all because of Kati.
And if it was terrible, it's not my fault.
It's not because of Kati.
Mm-mm.
That is now documented live and on the internet forever.
That means it's real.
Yep. What's your middle initial?
I can't tell you that.
Well, then how can I guess? See, at least I knew Ben's middle initial.
Yeah, but if I tell you my middle initial, you will guess what my...
What's your middle initial?
Mm-mm.
That's crazy. I can look it up. It's fine. I have access to these things. But we are joined by a guest, Reverend Paul Gaschler. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So Paul is the associate pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church here in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Katie's been working here longer than you've been there, Pastor.
That is true.
Officially.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you accepted a call. Katie looked for a job, and by the grace of God,
Here we are.
here we are. And you're Katie's husband.
I am.
And I do mean that because you know how the world goes.
Yeah.
I have a wife who's a deaconess, but she's often Micah's wife. But you're around here, you're Katie's husband. I just want to make that clear.
What
In
a
most
title.
places.
That
That was true before I got here.
Yeah. So how are you doing? How's life?
I'm good. Really enjoying being here in St. Louis, and it's really been fun to get to know the campus here well because of Katie working here.
Mm-hmm.
So really been a blessing. So fun to be here today.
Yeah. So the congregation that you're a pastor of is one of the historic LCMS congregations, Holy Cross, where Walther once preached,
Mm-hmm.
Across the street from the old seminary,
Right.
at a corner to CPH, across the street from what used to be Lutheran Hospital.
Right.
So you're kind of at an epicenter of LCMS Lutheranism. I don't know how relevant this question is.
Good.
But how does it feel any kind of way to be there, expectation wise or anything else like that? But it's so radically different now than it was then. What does it feel like to be there?
It's honestly just fun because there is the historical significance, but in many ways, and I think it's what's shaped the congregation for how it is now, there's already been this lament of, that used to be such a great area. And that's often how it's
Sure.
That used to be it. And it's kind of no, it still actually is. And it's been on the mend. It took some time, but it's very much on an upward trajectory. And that's something we actually talk about quite a bit is our footprint in this neighborhood. And what can we do with the resources that we have, having some of these old buildings, having CPH not too far away. The Lutheran Hospital we don't have a connection with anymore.
Right.
But even I don't know much about it yet, but there's the German Society that,
sure.
Historically, just culturally, had a lot to do with that neighborhood, a lot of German Lutherans there. So a lot of these old just groups that we're asking that question. We have this footprint here. What can we help to do to kind of help this neighborhood? So it's fun.
Yeah.
People have just a very negative view of it if they know much about it, and it kind of makes sense that they do. But that's fun to kind of share.
Sure.
That we're very positive about it.
Having grown up in North St. Louis, of course, there's some rough areas.
Yeah, right.
And it's just honestly, even where I grew up in Ferguson, people ask me all the time, and they're shocked. I'm like, well, when I was a kid, it was safe to like ride bikes and go to the park and things like that. And I don't want to disparage the neighborhood because there's still pockets, but it is drastically changed, and there's no getting around that either. But there are a lot of great things going on in St. Louis. In South St. Louis, things have been going that way for a while now. So you're right, positionally, kind of how things, where you guys are at in history, a lot of opportunity. But even when it's not quite there, it's still value of doing what we do. So that's great. Right. So, Katie, you haven't said much to your husband yet. Now I've made it a little awkward. So how are you enjoying it? Because I feel like we asked you questions more about you, and I don't know if we asked questions necessarily about you and Paul at Holy Cross.
Yeah, I would say it's really fun. The congregation is so amazing. They have welcomed us immediately. I've felt at home there almost immediately. There's a really good community culture, and I think with just the presence of the arts, I think it's a good opportunity for Paul to really grow his music interest even more. So it's been neat to see. So yeah, it's a great place.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Paul, I know a little bit about you, but we always like to ask our guests, if you don't mind, and I'm going to ask you two questions at the same time.
Sure.
If you could tell us a little bit about your background, and then tell us the story of what led to you becoming a pastor, of deciding to go to the seminary, and then all of that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in southwest Nebraska, Imperial, small town, 2,000 people. Very, especially since coming east to Indiana and whatnot, you have small towns here, but we were really out in the middle of nowhere. So, but it's a nice town I grew up in. We had a good Lutheran church that my parents were very involved in, and so we were very involved as children. My dad was an elder, one of the last few male Sunday school teachers. I feel like, that's not common at all anymore. Right. I grew up there and had a close connection with our church. And then when I was a sixth grader, we got a new pastor. Before, the church had struggled a little bit, but Pastor David Kale came in, and I was in his first confirmation class, and he really clicked with our church, with our family. He became a really strong family friend, and certainly for me as a pastor was incredibly influential. And he was a second career guy, was very capable, and so it wasn't long after, I think when I was still in high school, we started getting vicars. And so then it was really neat to see young guys that were preparing for the ministry, and that was very influential. And so I think between those influences at home, I always would toy with the idea, what if I became a pastor? So then I went to Concordia, Nebraska to be a music teacher. I was always wanted to be a choir teacher, so I was very excited to do that, but was also interested. Having grown up in a small town, I had no concept of Lutheran schools or even a large enough congregation where you'd have maybe a professional musician. But as I was there, would get involved with church music. And then also a lot of my best friends ended up being guys that were pre-seminary. So I would talk with them, and I clicked with them really well. And it was kind of funny. I would just keep making comments like, oh, you guys are going to get to hang out more, like at seminary, like another 4 years of college. And I think one of the guys was just like, well, why don't you just come too? So I think it took a little bit of wrestling while I was there, but having those good friends especially was a good influence. And so then after visiting the seminary with those friends and kind of just wrestling with some personal things, then it was like, yep, this is something I want to do, and I'll get to take music with me. It was hard to let go of the idea of being a music teacher, I think was a big thing. But just a lot of good positive influences that just kind of became insurmountable. At some point, you just have to accept what's being laid at your feet and realize you want to do this. So, yeah.
Sure.
Notice he kind of glossed over where he went to seminary.
That was gonna be a question. We're not gonna avoid it. It's fine. So now everybody knows which seminary you went to. Clearly. You went to our sister seminary in Fort Wayne.
Yeah. So That's where my home pastor was from.
Sure.
And, you know, it's one of those kind of sad things, and we see this everywhere. And you see this in all things in life, but if you have a pastor that doesn't do so well, and if he's from one seminary, then you naturally maybe look the other way, and then you get a better pastor, and it's less maybe about the seminaries.
Sure.
So you kind of get that culture. So anyway, I had a strong connection to Fort Wayne from my home pastor.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we got our vicars. And then even though Concordia, Nebraska, I think typically sends more guys to St. Louis, just kind of matter-of-factly, my class of guys, we had one guy that was a big Fort Wayne Christ Academy guy from like grade school. So he was kind of like the big cheerleader. One of my good buddies, his dad was a pastor from Fort Wayne. Mm-hmm. And then I had a connection. So there was a bunch of us that we were just good friends, and we had a bunch of strong Fort Wayne influences. So, I went and visited there. It was a really good visit, I remember. And then it was kind of this is one of the sad stories, but I think it's worth telling just because it kind of illustrates the point. Because of that friend group, we were all kind of known as wanting to go to Fort Wayne. And so there was a visit to go to St. Louis when I was at Seward. But because I was with that group, I didn't get invited to go, even though I thought I was gonna go on that visit, but I just didn't get the details. And it wasn't like a malicious slight, but I just didn't visit then. And I thought, well, I'm pretty set on going to Fort Wayne. So it's one of those things I regret that it's not until I take a call to St. Louis and my wife gets a job at Concordia St. Louis that I'm now actually getting to see it.
To be honest with you, though, I mean, sure, each seminary wants everybody to go to their seminary, but you've been highly involved. It's not one of those things where it can be like a bad relationship between a person and the other seminary. But like you said, that's not about the seminaries. That's a personal thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I tell people all the time. So I got recruited heavily to go to Fort Wayne when I was at Concordia, Chicago. I can't remember how many guys from our class. Maybe there were 8 of us, and only one ended up at Fort Wayne. So if you go to a Concordia, if there's a strong influence from one seminary, your class, class is likely to go. Yep. Just because that's how groups work.
Yeah.
I think there's something to say about your support system. I mean, and
100%.
the people that you went through seminary are still your best friends. Yeah. So
well, and that's what I was going to say. Like
it's huge.
Having a group of people to go and struggle through the schooling and the formation process, that's invaluable. I have a group of guys that I'm really close with. We didn't go to Concordia together, but our time at the seminary was extended. We all were on a 5-year path for different reasons.
Sure.
But I chose St. Louis because I'm from here. I did visit Fort Wayne, and again, it was nothing about the seminary. I joke about it a lot, and
as one
especially with Ben, because Ben's from Fort Wayne, although he went to seminary here.
Yeah.
And now that Katie's the co-host, for me, it just goes on.
Oh yeah.
But in all seriousness, my in-laws. Dorothy's father's a pastor, went to Fort Wayne.
Right.
Their last name is Nauman. There's a Nauman Hall. They're connected there. And it's not like, well, I'm not a Nauman, but it was one of those things, a lot of different things. But my home congregation pastor went here. Yeah. There was a guy, Mark Koshman, who now works at Concordia St. Paul. He was our field worker, and he was heavily influential in me deciding to pursue ministry. And so, yeah, and we just visited Fort Wayne not long ago to meet with our counterparts, or the other enrollment department. I saw Matt Wiefelt last week. I'll spend 4 days with them this week, and I think over the next couple months we'll spend more time. And I'm not saying that, so it's not. We have 2 seminaries, and we have 2 great seminaries, and I tell people all the time, especially when somebody's like, well, St. Louis, and I'm like, I'm not trying to convince you to go to Fort Wayne, but go see what it is and what it's about, because you might do better there.
Yeah.
I think it also continues this really positive relationship that we have kind of forming. If people go and visit both and see that they're both really good. It's been really cool to see. So Paul has done some stuff for us on campus, and So you played music for our vocatio retreat, and then you were the chaplain at our LCMSU retreat, which was really cool. So, yeah, I just positive things between both seminaries. Really cool. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to take a step back because there were a couple things you mentioned that I thought were really interesting. And I know of Imperial, Nebraska for one reason. I had a classmate from Westfield House who did his vicarage there.
Right, yeah.
Vicarages open you up to the world, man. My vicarage year was in Huntsville, Alabama, and I didn't know anything about it until I went there. And it's like, I think it's the most concentrated population of science-based PhDs in astro because of NASA.
Yeah, I've heard
It's
that.
huge. Like the tech industry in Huntsville, Alabama is massive, mostly because of after World War II when they brought like Werner von Braun and the other rocket scientists from Germany. They ended up in Huntsville, Alabama, of all places.
Yeah.
Right. So small town, which is something I'm coming across more and more because in small town you don't have Lutheran schools because
Right.
2,000 people in a town. It's not impossible, but of the vicar, the kind of string of vicars being highly influential and there being a young presence in that. Can you just like speak into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned it being remote out there. And so, we didn't even have much interaction with other Lutheran churches. And so, especially, so Pastor Kale, when he came to Imperial, I mean, I think he was in his late 30s. But when you're a kid, that still seems like old and like an adult.
Yeah.
So it was like the idea of a young pastor, just like it, you have no concept of the idea of a young pastor, like just zero concept. And so suddenly when these guys that, so what age are you if you're out of Concordia as a vicar? Are you like 25, 26? The idea of seeing,
Maybe, yeah,
or anything like
sometimes,
that. I mean, to see that young of a guy in the pastoral role is just something I hadn't ever thought of. And so just to see those younger guys, but seeing them, even though most guys on vicarage, you're still feeling it out. Maybe you're a little, I don't know, arrogant's the worst construction, but maybe you're confident. Like, I think I can do this. But seeing guys, it's like, it seems like they know what they're doing. It doesn't seem like they're incompetent or anything, but, and we had some really good vicars for sure. So seeing these guys, but they're also really relatable to play video games with you. You're talking sports with them. And so you're like, that's, kind of getting over that idea that pastors are these other people. Mm-hmm. Even though you love them, you're like, but I'm not a pastor. But you see these young guys, like, that guy's really relatable.
Sure.
So then it's suddenly like, yeah, I could be like him maybe.
Yeah.
So that was awesome.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I had a slightly different influence, but to some extent, in part, the same view of the office. So my pastor growing up here in St. Louis, Reverend Jonathan Stein, who's now sainted, he's older, closer to retirement age. I think he did, in fact, retire from our congregation while I was still in high school. But right, it's the pastors like Pastor Stein. But then in high school, he wasn't younger, but a guy named Mike Maschke, he wasn't young in age, but he had a very young spirit from teaching high schoolers and being a high school chaplain. Yeah. And he's very challenging us in our faith in the best way, because I mean, you could go like different routes where in teaching high schoolers, because not everybody's a Lutheran, so you take one route, but he didn't care. He challenged everybody, and that kind of this is important, right? And this is a very important aspect of your life. Take on religion really struck home with me. It still took me a while to find my way to the seminary, but I got here eventually. All right, so you're in Fort Wayne. You're taking classes. You're learning how to become a pastor, and at some point, you meet a young lady who catches your eye, your interest. So how did you? I mean, other than just being in Fort Wayne and having nothing else to do in life, how did the two of you meet?
Is that a Fort Wayne joke?
Yeah.
There are things to do there.
That was not a personal shot. Yeah, that was no, off the record. We went to Fort Wayne, and there were some. It was I got to see a different part of the city. It was all right.
Yeah.
That is most definitely on the record.
Yeah, that's fine.
It was great.
That's great. Yeah, so actually, it would have been... So I mentioned I had some good buddies that I knew from Seward. We went to Fort Wayne together. So it's not like I went to campus and it wasn't like I wasn't going to know anybody, but you're still like feeling a new place out. And so I think it was maybe the second or third day, there was a cookout or something outside. So I show up with my buddies. We don't know anyone else. And I see a girl helping with the cookout. And yeah, it was Katie. And kind of right away, I can't remember what I said to my buddies, but basically at that point, I was calling dibs. Like, I'm gonna go for her. You guys can't.
That is a very seminarian thing.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah.
Yep,
So,
yep.
and obviously with just the general makeup of our campuses.
When there's like a handful
yeah,
of
you know what I mean.
girls
So,
on campus.
and so, yeah, I noticed her back then. So that was going into first year. And first year I talked with her some, didn't really have good opportunities to talk with her more. But then going into my second year, I was going to become an RA in one of the dorms. And so where she was working with the dean of students, she effectively was sort of in charge of the RAs. So then I had reasons to email her this summer going into my second year. So we're talking via email and, finding appropriate ways to kind of flirt with her, but not cross the line of unprofessional and, finding reasons to talk and whatnot. And so, just kind of slowly started talking more, would have to interact in person, which is good.
We were partners in our CPR class.
Oh,
yeah,
look
I
at
didn't
that.
plan that. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and so, yeah, then just naturally kind of feeling out, hey, I think we've got something here. So then had to be careful in navigating the professional lines. But the dean of students, Dr. Zeroth, was really great about it. We kind of said, hey, we're not dating or anything, but if we were to start, and all that. So he was so helpful with us in that way. So, yeah, that's how we met. And, yeah, so that was my second year.
Yeah.
Sure. And then vicarage?
Yeah, so vicarage, it was kind of funny because at that time, I had a sister who lived in Phoenix. And so I had been liking the idea of, hey, there's a couple vicarages in Arizona. This is the time to go anywhere. So I was like, I think I'll go to Arizona. But then meeting her and being like, oh, man, could definitely see us getting serious. So I need to kind of, be careful where I'm planning vicarage. So I had spent summer vicarages, or a summer vicarage in between first and second year at Epiphany Lutheran in Dorr, Michigan, just south of Grand Rapids. So I kind of knew Michigan from that. And so I thought, well, I need to stay relatively close to Fort Wayne for her. So I requested Michigan and ended up in Montague, Michigan, St. James and Montague, which was about 3.5 hours from Fort Wayne.
3.5 hours from Fort Wayne. Yeah, it was like roughly an hour from Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were excited
On Lake
about
Michigan.
that. Oh, it's a
Oh,
beautiful
that's
place. It's an awesome
great.
place. It's a really awesome place. That's probably one of our favorite. That might be my favorite place
Yeah.
in the world. Like just
Yeah.
location,
Sure.
just everything about it. Small farming community, but awesome lake culture
Beaches,
there.
Boats.
Debatable. Anyway,
Yeah.
the beach part. I know there's sand and water, but
Oh,
let's
it's
be careful of
incredible.
what we call a beach.
Oh, it's
Okay.
incredible. Got the worst sunburn of my life there because it's just perfect conditions. You don't have
Sure.
any idea how bad your back's getting burned when you're sitting there reading on the beach.
That's fair.
Anyway, so and then proposed to her. I think that summer, moved to Michigan, proposed to her in July, expecting to get married in the spring or after vicarage. And she's like, nope, we should get married in December, and I want to come up there and
Yep.
be on vicarage with you. So
Look at that.
4-month engagement.
it was great.
People are like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah.
Yes.
Let's just do this."
Yeah, Dorothy and I, so just because of logistics, I proposed when she was a student at Westwood House. And so, we got engaged, and then I was back home, and she was in the UK, and I was in Chicago. And then she came back to the States, but I started seminary, and then she went back to Chicago to finish her last year. So we were engaged for almost a year and a half. That's too long.
That was too long. Yeah. This is my piece of life advice. Just just get married.
If you propose, you plan to get
Yeah.
married. So
Yeah.
I mean, if you got engaged and you had the resources to do it next week, do it.
And girls, let's be honest, you have your whole wedding planned out.
Yeah.
Like
already.
already.
Dorothy had a binder, but it is legit a book of like, and it's she could, I think, have it published of how to plan your wedding.
Nice.
Ooh.
With like a list of like what type, like how to find the resources in your area. It was remarkable.
Oh, yeah.
I did very little, except demanded that there was no almond extract in our wedding cake.
Yeah, what's up with that? I listened to an episode where you just destroyed almond flavored things.
I like almonds, like actual
Yeah.
almonds,
Actual.
but the extract, it's just
Yeah.
doesn't taste good.
Is that the flavor in amaretto?
It is.
That is not. That's not good. Yeah.
Right.
Almonds are great, but yeah.
The extract is weird.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Like it's such a weird flavor. It's I've tried like non-plant. Oh, and that's probably why like a non-plant based milk.
Almond
and
milk.
silk is silk. Is that soy milk or is that
They
almond
do
milk?
make almond milk too.
Well, anyway, it's gross. Anyway, okay, all right.
Back on
If you
track.
had like a traditional wedding cake with almond in it, fine. And like it's not like I'll insult anybody and throw their cake away, but yeah.
We didn't even have cake.
No.
Oh, good for
we
you.
didn't.
Yeah.
Donuts?
S'mores.
S'mores.
Oh.
And mini cheesecakes.
Look at that. Okay, I'm a big fan of that type of thing.
Oh,
we had a
yeah.
traditional cake, but
Yeah.
it was funfetti though. So with the twist.
Yeah.
So listeners know Katie's new, and I will talk my way all the way to the end of the podcast, and I want to pause intentionally for Katie.
Thanks.
If have you been having things you wanted to say?
No, I mean
Could you tell us the real story about
I
how
know
you guys got together
I
and
know
what
these
really
stories
happened?
already. I'm trying to think if there were any stories that I did want to tell. Do I want to tell this story?
Because there is Dorothy's version of how we
Right.
met and how everything played out, and then there's my version.
I'll tell a story.
There we go.
Okay. So it was, I think it was maybe like the second quarter. So Fort Wayne's on quarter system. So this was like in the fall. Well, going into winter quarter. I don't know. Who cares? And I lived right off campus, and Paul had visited me a couple times, and he brought a bottle of gin over, and he left it in my apartment. And I didn't tell my parents that I was dating, seeing, talking to anybody. Because, you don't tell them until they need to know, kind of thing.
Sure.
My dad comes over, and he's like, "Oh, you have gin. Can I have some?" And I was like, "Well, that's not mine." And I don't think at that point I told him whose it was, but eventually he figured out. I think he saw us interacting, and he figured it out.
Right.
So then my dad was a professor,
Right.
and it was like the first day he's doing roll call, and Paul's in the class. And he calls his name, and he just looks at him, and he goes, "You like gin, don't you?"
And I've never talked to him at this point at all. And that's just how it starts. He looks at me.
So
And no one else in the class has any clue
Oh, yeah, for sure.
why he said that. So it's super awkward in the best way.
But to be fair, my dad does say some
Oh, well, yeah.
just off the wall stuff, so probably just blended right into the conversation.
It made sense coming from him, and that it made no sense
Yeah.
to anyone else. So
Oh, I
Yeah.
see what you mean.
yeah, like it was
sure.
typical, and that it made no sense.
Maybe someday we'll have my dad on this podcast.
Oh, boy.
That's
Possible.
a 3-hour episode,
Okay.
probably.
No. We had Dr. Kolb on, and it's in 2 parts because, I mean, when you're sitting there talking to Dr. Kolb, time doesn't exist. He's such a treasure.
I met him for the first time, and he is such a sweet
Yeah.
and welcoming person. And
He's just a remarkable human being.
yeah, we try to send visitors to his class for class visits.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about coming,
Intentionally, he will win you over.
oh yeah.
So Paul, vicarage, you come back. Now you're married. What's call life like after that?
Yeah. So at that point, I think we basically wanted to try to get a call in either Michigan or Indiana. Katie's an only child, so we wanted to stay relatively close to her parents. And so, and we felt, I mean, there's a lot of churches between Indiana and Michigan, so we felt pretty confident that we'd end up relatively close in that way. So we weren't too stressed about it. And Dr. Pulse there, who's in charge of placement, he does like to have fun with dropping hints and stuff. So you start, and I mean, this stuff's kind of fun this year. You know, so different districts, they publish, you know, the call list and who's listing candidates or who's wants a candidate. So Indiana does, Michigan doesn't. Oh. So Michigan, we're like, we don't know because they don't publish it, but Indiana does. So, you know, he's dropping hints, and I think at some point he dropped the hints of Indianapolis area, and so then I'm creeping on the site, and finally, I think a month or two before call day, Concordia Greenwood pops up as they're going to be, you know, looking at a candidate. So I think I texted Katie right away because her being from Indiana, you know, I said, hey, Greenwood, do you know Greenwood? And she's like, oh, Greenwood, yeah, we go for their marching band or whatever.
That
so
is
you
the
knew
only reason I knew of Greenwood.
You knew Greenwood. So it was kind of fun because at that point then, it was kind of like 90% certain we're going to this church, but you'd never know, of course. And they, you know, you hear stories about them having to make day of switches, and I can't imagine. So you're still, in some ways, it was not as fun as vicarage, where it was my vicarage that I went to was a unique one. It was a one-time only, so I had never heard of it. It wasn't one of those that you've heard of all the time. Sure. So when I heard that one, it's like I have no clue about St. James, no clue about Montague. That was fun, but still waiting to hear Concordia Greenwood was still, you know, nervous but fun, and still a great time. And because that was close to Fort Wayne, there was a number of people from Concordia Greenwood that came up, so that was fun to get to meet.
Service. That was the coolest thing.
Some of my lay people and leaders, really good people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was a fun year anticipating that.
And you wanted to get started right away, which is just your personality.
It sure is.
We did find a house to rent because the head elder was getting ready to, he had flipped this house. He was getting ready to put it on the market. Mm-hmm. But just the timing was just that he just said, well, why don't you guys rent it instead? Mm. So it was pretty amazing. We had a really nice house to rent. And Concordia was just so good to us. Mm-hmm. And, it got weird because COVID hit.
And so what year did you graduate? And then how did your first call begin, and how was life in that first role? Because sole pastor, associate pastor?
Yeah, so sole pastor. Okay. So that was 2019. So May or whatever call day was April 2019, started in June. Sole pastor at Concordia Greenwood. At that time, I think was averaging 100 a Sunday, one service, traditional suburb. It's a just south of Indianapolis suburb. And so, it was a great congregation to get a call to, very supportive. It was something neat where, right away, I was ordained and installed there same day. And, you don't think much of that stuff necessarily, but, I think it was the head elders, like, we've never had an ordination at our church.
Sure.
And I'm like, and it just kind of, I never would think about that, but that was something right away. People are like, oh, we're so excited about that. I'm like, oh, yeah, I suppose that makes sense. That's something I should appreciate that they're loving. So that was so neat. They responded to teaching really well. It was something where you're young, so you can't operate based off of experience. You don't have any.
Right.
And you're young enough to be everyone's kid, and stuff like that, right? And you're telling people that, because I think I was 26 or 27, and they're like, oh my gosh, our pastor's 26 or 20. It's just funny,
Sure.
And they don't mean anything by it when they say that stuff. But, it was a testament, I think. And this is what I would say. I would say it about both seminaries. I obviously have the experience of Fort Wayne, but the formation aspect. You don't go in, you shouldn't go in thinking you know how to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. You go in, you're like, I have no clue what I'm doing. And then you come out and you're still kind of thinking, I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm a kid. But before you know it, you've been, you don't, just by reflex, you're operating based on what we were taught and formed to do. And then before you know it, you have people that, despite the fact you're being self-critical. Oh, was that the best sermon? Or before you know it, you have people like, oh, Pastor, that was really great. Like, that was really helpful. Thank you. Thank you for visiting my family member. You do your first funeral and you're like, oh, and you have people coming up like, oh, that was so great. Thank you. And it was something where I ended up being just after 6 months or so, just being so thankful for the formation aspect that you just realize that something stuck after 4 years, even if, in some ways you don't feel that way. And so that was something that was really neat, was to just be able to regurgitate what I had been given and how well it's received. I think that's something that's taught at both seminaries. It's just keeping it simple, just doing, just relating to people and then doing word and sacrament, just giving them just give them God's grace. Don't get in the way of it. And it's amazing. It works. It really just does work. And it's humbling.
Yeah, for sure. No, there are lessons from seminary that I still replay in my mind. And people ask this question because of there are a lot of different things. How much training do you guys need?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
High context, all this stuff. We teach guys generally how to be a pastor and how to do the things that are absolutely required of you. But your first call will teach you how to be a pastor, and then any subsequent call after that will teach you how to be their pastor.
Yeah.
And that is still a really good way of going about it, because even if you had taken another call in Indianapolis, the next congregation or near Indy is going to be different.
Yeah.
And they're going to require different things of you, but the general things will stay the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Concordia Greenwood, they were really patient with me, very, I think they were very reasonable with what to expect from a guy coming out of the seminary. And then, so I was there, started in June, and then, whenever all the COVID stuff hit. And, so that's a great, I joke with people, in some ways, I think some of us fresh out of sim, especially if you got any little bit of confidence in those 6 months, I think in some ways we were really well suited to deal with it, because I had no routine at that point. It's like, I have no idea what I'm doing at this point. I'm still like every day being like, what should I work on? And so when COVID hits, it's like, well, I didn't know what I was doing anyway.
Yeah.
But you have, when I'd hear about pastors that, guys that have been in the ministry for 20, 30 years, and they're locked in. They're firing all cylinders with their ministry, and then COVID hits and just utterly disrupts it.
Sure.
And so the number of guys that I think were close to retirement that weren't going to retire, but ended up retiring after a few years, it's like, I think that was really hard to have your successful routines just obliterated.
Completely derailed, yeah.
But for me, it's like, well, I already didn't know what I was doing anyway, and so I kind of liked the challenge of doing new stuff. So it was kind of fun to say, how are we going to be the church despite all this? And so, it's still stressful and challenging, but that was a neat thing to go through with Concordia Greenwood, because we just, had good leaders. So, let's meet, let's talk, let's figure out what we can do. Mm-hmm. And, you just kind of slowly are able to get back to doing your thing. And before you know it, you've gone through this very traumatic thing together. And kind of to your point, at that point, I wasn't just a new pastor, I was their pastor, and they were my congregation. We were together, and you sense that. And it's like, this is wonderful. This is great. And then I think that's the fun thing. I would imagine other pastors would say the same, is when at that moment when you do feel like, yep, this is my place. These are my people. We're in this together. And it's not that you don't feel that way before, but you're just uncertain. You're just not, you don't know the place well enough. You can't build that culture overnight. So, yeah. Just wild to think how many years I've been a pastor now, because sometimes I still just feel like I just graduated or something until you think about it.
Yeah. No, I haven't been a pastor for very long, but I'm coming up on my, I'm on 8 years, which is odd.
A long time.
Well, and half of it's now been here at the seminary.
Sure.
I've almost been here for 4 years, and we my first week that I started as director of recruitment, by Friday we closed for COVID, and I hadn't been a recruiter before. Sorry, Dale. I don't know if
What
this
is that?
bang. It's like it's the heating.
Oh.
So if you hear it dinging, even though we're on our lovely set, you know, old buildings. It gave us, like, being derailed by COVID, because we were getting ready. We were planning things like, all right, let's start reimagining things and what we could begin to do this year differently. And then COVID hit, and then it kept going on and on and on. And that kind of slowing us down gave us the space, just because we didn't have anything else to do, to truly imagine who and where and what we could begin to do differently and intentionally. And it gave us a season to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And so that was your first call. Holy Cross is now your second call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna. Well, for me, Greenwood was such a special place, but you did end up accepting another call, which is, I think, it might be weird or hard for people to hear, because our church, Concordia Greenwood, is a great place. We didn't leave it because we hated it. Right. So, yeah, maybe talk about that process for us.
It's emotional, but yeah, I can talk about it for sure. Yeah, I think it really is that, just simply that question of where can God use you best. It really is that simple. And it became very easy to just follow, to kind of listen to your conscience, check your conscience, and then follow it and not be motivated by fear or by or envy or anything. So actually, I mentioned it already, so I can share a little bit about this. My vicarage congregation up in Michigan, I had mentioned, the pastor I'd worked with when I was a vicar, he was going to be retiring, and I kind of knew he was going to retire at some point. And, I had really good relationships. So, like the president up there, he came up to me and said, I don't quite know how the call process works, but when it comes up, we're going to be contacting you. And so he had told me that back on vicarage. I mean, we had such a good relationship. And it's like, yeah. But then I sort of came up. I was back there to visit, to preach for an anniversary. And it was like that week, and the pastor happened to also be like announcing he was going to retire. So I'm back there with these people we love, this place we love, and it's just supposed to be fun, and it was fun. But right away, I think the president kind of took me aside. He's like, hey, people are going to be asking, do you want to come be our pastor? And it's like, oh boy, that's a wave of emotions. And that's what I mean about when I mentioned, sometimes there's envy with what you wish you could be doing as a pastor. So part of me is like, that's my favorite place on the planet. Like, of course I want to go back there and be a pastor. And so you're kind of, okay, waiting and seeing with their vacancy process. And they ended up, because the pastor had been there 30 years. I mean, when I was a vicar, he had been a pastor there longer than I had been alive. That was very humbling to do the math. Anyway, but they did an interim or a long-term vacancy or whatever. Which makes a lot of sense. So I went from thinking, well, maybe they'll just say, we know who we want, we're going to go call them. And it's like, that sounded exciting to me. So I was kind of, in a way, preparing for that, but although also knowing that probably wasn't going to be the case. But kind of was waiting for that, anticipating, and it just kind of kept getting longer and longer. And then you're like, okay, am I supposed to go do that? Would it be a bad thing? I love these people, but I was the vicar. Would it be a different thing if I'm the pastor? And as I'm mulling all of that, then just because, where we're at with pastors, a number of congregations, you have places coming to inquire. And that's where that conscience thing, I think, becomes really important about, where will God use me best? Not just where do I want to go, although that's important. Where does, where will my wife do well? What will she enjoy? What would be good for us? And so some other good congregations came up. There was a church in Minnesota that extended a call to me that would have been a great place, and I'm really thankful they've gotten a really good pastor, it sounds like. But Holy Cross came up, and at first I see associate pastor, I see kind of a small urban congregation. I'm thinking, this doesn't really make sense. So, I kind of just dismissed it right away. But it was in learning more. They had a really good call committee. They had wanted to call before COVID, had to wait till after COVID. So they had spent a lot of time, did a lot of good work preparing stuff. And the more I would talk to them, the more I was intrigued by the opportunities. And it just, as I would talk with Kati about it, it went from, hey, I think we need to consider going there, to eventually it's like, this is where we have to go. And there's no question. And I can tell you, out of envy, I still love the idea of being called and going up to Michigan. Out of comfortability, I'd love to just stay here in Greenwood because I feel like I know what I'm doing finally. But it was just with some of the opportunities at Holy Cross, the uniqueness of what they're doing and some skill sets I think I have. It's like, I need to go here. And I've been at Greenwood long enough that I think I've done some good work. Helped get them through COVID, helped evaluate some things, did some great stuff. I think someone else can come in here and do a lot of good work and take them another step that maybe I'm not able to do. And so it's just kind of listening to your conscience, just looking at what God's laid before you and just saying it's pretty clear what we need to do.
And it's not tough. And now I've had some friends, some classmates who have received different calls, and it's something I get. It's always interesting when somebody's like, what do you think about this? How do I go through this? And it's like, why am I the guy? Yeah. But it makes sense because this is not my third call. And when I accepted my second call, I had received two calls at the same time, plus the call you have. And no matter what decision you make, you're telling somebody no, which is tough because it's not just a job offer. It's we're brothers and sisters in Christ, and they love their pastor. They are looking for a new pastor. And it is, all these questions come in. So my dad was a Marine when I was a kid. So I'm like, I'm suited for change in my life. And it's a very natural thing for me to feel after 3 years of being in a place to pack up and move and go somewhere else. And to see other people be in a revolving door, and I want to resist that. But so far, my calls, I've been an agent of change. Well, anyway, that was a weird. I can't remember exactly what you said that made me think about that. But just the challenges of receiving a different call, and then the process. It's not easy. And yeah, I just had my last Sunday where I was a long-term vacancy where I thought I'd be somewhere for 6 months, and it's been 21. And you don't expect people to cry when their vacancy pastor is leaving, and you don't think you're going to be emotional. But yeah, as I began to preach my last sermon to them as their vacancy, it's like, oh, right, this is, yeah. It's not everybody gets to do this work, and it's such a remarkable thing to be able to be a pastor for somebody and everything that it entails. Well, any last thoughts, Kati, before we jump into the best segment of the podcast?
One thing I wish we could maybe have a little bit more time to talk about is the friends that you made in seminary.
Do you want to say briefly on that?
Yeah, just real briefly.
You can say however you want.
Yeah, no, just again, I had really good buddies first at Seward. I mean, we clicked. We did sports together, did music together, formed that bond there, and then went to seminary and just kind of kept adding guys each year. So I've got a group of friends. There's 7 of us. 7?
I think it's 7.
Yeah.
We'll call it 7.
Yeah. Anyway, really tight. And so, like, we had a buddy in California. So during... and I guess we started during vicarage. We would do a Zoom chat once a week. We were pretty good about that. And then I think it was because of COVID, and we had a buddy in California. So I mean, really locked down. That for his sake, we're like, we got to start that up again. And so we started a weekly Zoom chat again, and we still do it. And not everyone's on it every night that we do it, but there's always 2 or 3. So like last night, I had a buddy bring up a really heavy casuistry question. So we're talking about that. So it is funny when I hear at pastors' conferences or things where they're like, you need to have people you talk to. And I realize, I'm like, oh, not everyone has this group like I do. And I would say ours is probably more unique. We always go to the symposium in Fort Wayne, so we've got that. And then every summer we try to do a big get-together in a central location. So, I mean, we're really tight, always talking. And that's huge. I mean, I've got buddies I can ask anything. Any weird thing comes up, I've got 3 different guys I'm texting. And that's huge because I realize not everyone always has that. And they should. I don't mean that as a laying guilt on them. But everyone in the ministry, every Christian for that matter, should have those people. And that's something we should always encourage for sure, for everyone. So very thankful for that. That's been huge in my ministry, no question. Huge in becoming a pastor too.
Yeah, the group of guys that I'm super close to from seminary, we try to have those opportunities and things like that. And it does get tough depending on different scenarios. But it is a scenario where any one of those guys, if I had something to talk about, I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone and say, hey, like, do you have a moment? Can we set apart a time? And I think every one of them would respond yes. But also then I have somebody that you can't process everything with everybody.
Right. Yeah.
From a wife's perspective, I'm so thankful that you have those friends because, something will come up and I'll just be like, ask. Shout out to Shetler.
Yeah.
Shetler, it's always you. I always say, go ask Shetler. Cause, but all of them.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful that you have all of them.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
I think they keep you more sane than I could.
Yeah.
Probably.
Well, and it's one of our buddies. He was the one that was really stubborn. Like, we got to get together. So he would do the hard work organizing these events because the rest of us were like, I don't know if I can make it. That. And he's like, no, guys, like, we got to do this. And it's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's all really good stuff, Paul. And you're around. If there's ever an opportunity for you to come back on the podcast, we'll definitely have you back on. But it's a rite of passage for the host. And it's funny because I feel like when Dorothy was on, Ben did most of the questions. Yeah. And maybe when Selena was on, I did most of the questions. And it's just like, what are you going to, well, anyway. All right, well, we're going to jump into our last little segment of the podcast for the day, Ripe for the Pick and Leave It on the Tree. So all of these are subjective things, which means they are by far the most important things in the world. Just random stuff. I have a growing list on notes on my phone. Where if you like it, it's ripe for the picking, and if you don't like it, you'll leave it on the tree. And if there's a reason you want to specify, let us know. But sometimes that's not the case. All right, do you want to start or?
I'll start because mine has a theme.
Oh, there you go. See, that's like Ben. Ben pick ones particular for people. Mine are always random.
So I struggled because I was thinking, I should pick things that I have no idea how he feels about.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But I could not come up with a single one.
Well, that's just a sign of a good marriage. Yeah.
So then I came up with, I'll pick something from Nebraska, something from Indiana, and something from St. Louis.
Oh, the St. Louis one is going to be controversial, I think. That's okay.
And they're all food items.
Okay. Now it's highly controversial. Okay.
Yep.
Here we go.
So, this is Nebraska. Ripe for the picking or leave it on the tree. Chili and cinnamon rolls.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go a different direction.
Have you heard of this?
It's something that...
Like they eat them together?
Yeah. So chili. So not like chili powder.
No, chili.
So
and
a bowl of chili and a cinnamon roll. So like school lunches, that was a meal. And that was like a favorite. It was, even in Nebraska, it could be controversial.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there is something...
wait. Answer the question, right? For the pick and leave it on the tree.
It's ripe.
Okay. Yeah. Say it with chest, man. It's all right.
Yeah. It's something about depending on the chili you make, the cinnamon, actually the flavors, like there's something to it. It's not just a silly combination, but people like Katie will just scoff at it. So
it's chili, great. Cinnamon rolls, great. Together, leave it on the tree. It's weird.
It's going to be leave it on the tree for me.
Yeah.
But I'll back you a little bit. The fact that it's a cinnamon roll, because it's not just cinnamon, is the reason why it's going to be leave it on the tree. But I'll throw a dash of cinnamon into my chili.
Okay,
well, it's kind of like the sweet cinnamon candy or like Fireball, the drink. Like
is it
it's that same kind of thing. I'm not saying. Well, so it's that same. The way the flavors play together.
That's fair.
There's something actually there. I don't feel strongly about it, but I'll have it because it's fun.
There's also like meat and beans.
Yeah.
That you don't get in Fireball or cinnamon candy.
Right.
I mean, you don't know.
But you do. But you do get sweetness with meats in other places.
But This leads into mine.
Okay.
And they're
Okay.
mine.
All right.
Right for the pick and leave it on the tree. This should be my standard question for everybody at all times, everywhere. Because
This again.
pineapple on pizza.
Ooh. I've been I'm going to pick that for sure. It's right, because I've been kind of craving that. But I'm the kind of person, I don't like breaking away from my norm. So the only pizza I want is pepperoni with banana peppers. I don't want to ever try anything else because I just love it. And the thought of getting a pizza that is like less than ideal is heartbreaking to me. Like, why would I mess with something I like? But I've been really craving the idea of the pineapple. So I'll say I'm going to pick that for sure. It's ripe.
I actually don't think I knew that about you.
There we go.
Well, it's leave it on the tree for me.
Yeah, it's the listeners know, and I don't need to go into it. Yeah, it's a hard leave it on the tree for me. People should stop. Anyway.
Okay, my next one.
Sure.
This is Indiana. Right for the pick-in or leave it on the tree. Indiana breaded tenderloin sandwiches. So for people that don't know, they take a pork tenderloin and they hammer it out until it's about this big. And then they put that on a regular size bun.
And I appreciate you trying to call this something different, but what you just described is a schnitzel.
Yeah, it is.
Well, okay. So it's leave it on the tree for me.
I had
That's
never
weird.
heard of it. And then every restaurant, you're like, pork tenderloin. And like most people don't even care that much about it, but it's like a traditional thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's an Indiana
So
thing.
it's a leave it for me. It does not.
All right.
It's okay, but it's.
I don't get it, but
You don't get the...
I don't get why we hammer it out this big
Oh.
and
Well,
then
it's
bread
kinda
it and fry it.
It's funny.
And then-
But
Yeah.
then it's on a bun,
bun that
like
big.
a regular size bun.
It's funny.
That just sounds like Indiana to me.
Yeah, well,
So I like schnitzel,
yeah.
Okay.
and if you had a bun on the side,
It,
or
It's
I
just-
mean, I would take it apart because how are you
Yeah.
gonna eat it?
it's just
anyway?
ironic presentation.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not actually.
So I do like that's why I'm like what you described as a schnitzel.
Yeah.
It's like one of these things where you're trying to take something that's an ethnic food and make it your own.
Right.
Sounds like Indiana.
So
I think it grew out of that because it's like, yeah, it's all these German people, but they just quit calling it that.
yeah,
And they
for
just call it.
solidarity, it sounds like something I would eat. So it's
Yeah.
right for me.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
Didn't
good.
expect that.
Yep. You expected me to reject it just because it was Indiana. I do.
Yep.
You cast
I
it.
do get
you did
it, though.
cast it in a very negative light.
do get it.
So that's
Yeah.
not
I don't
very
know
fair.
how not to.
Well,
Anyway.
Schnitzel's delicious, man. Anyway, all right. I don't like all German food, but schnitzel, W. Right for the pick-in. Leave it on the tree. Water skiing.
I'm gonna leave that on the tree.
Okay.
You haven't been.
I've never done skiing. I've done.
I didn't know you did your Vickers by Lake Michigan. And then as I was looking, I was like, this is actually a possible thing.
No,
to do.
well, actually, so
Yeah.
there was an experience where
Kind of had the opportunity.
Yeah, I was on a boat with some, and there was a high school boy, and he's doing it. And I'm looking at him like, I'm happy for him.
Yeah.
And if it's a tube, I'll do a tube. But it's like, I'm just asking you to get hurt.
I
Dude.
got it. For sure. You don't fall softly in the water when you're getting pulled by a motorboat. That's true.
Yeah. But if it's a tube, oh yeah. But not water skiing, I'll leave that.
Yeah, I'll leave that.
I'm happy
on the
for others, though.
tree.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Someone else will pick that.
I've also never done it. I've also never been real skiing. But so like if in both of those opportunities, just based off of I've surfed before and rode skateboards, and so I would probably offer wakeboarding and snowboarding before I ever tried skiing. Me personally.
Yeah, regular skiing, snow skiing, that's casual enough. But just watching people try to water
you'll
ski and
eat
get
it.
up,
Yeah,
it's like
horribly.
you can't. If you,
Yeah.
I think if I could just instantly be up on the skis, I would totally do it.
Yeah.
But watching people try to get up on the skis is painful enough to watch.
And then but like if you trip and fall, it's instantaneous, and like the water's like concrete.
Yeah.
I've thrown myself from a jet ski before, and like when you're skidding on the water, it's not like you're skipping. You're like a rock skipping on water. It like takes skin. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I like the tubing. And like we had a football coach, he would take us, and he would, it was borderline not safe the way he would drive the boat. But just holding on to dear life was so much fun as a
Part of the
high school
experience.
kid.
Sure.
And so you eventually had that moment where you're hitting the water hard, but at least like you've been holding on for dear life. It's been fun. You're bouncing. But the idea of skiing, like I can't even get up on the skis, and then I'm doing
Fair.
that.
That's fair. Yep.
Good question.
all right, my last one, the St. Louis theme.
Got it.
Right for the pick-in or leave it on the tree. St. Louis style pizza.
Oh, your face. That's all right.
Well, it's a mixed we were debating this at home, and it's one of those things where I've had some pizza that I think was St. Louis style, but I don't know if it actually was. So we just got emails last night, and we got 3 different types. Katie had to have a gluten-free one. Hers was decidedly not good. Cauliflower crust.
Well, the crust
all
wasn't
gluten-free things.
no. The crust wasn't the problem.
It's the cheese.
It was the amount of Provel cheese that was on mine.
Oh, okay.
It was too much.
Well, yeah, there was sauce, but I couldn't taste it.
Gotcha.
So.
Is Cyberg's, have you had their pizza?
I haven't had Cyberg's, but there's a place not far from, like, towards south called Alicia's that's also a really, like, towards the hills, St. Louis style But I grew up in North County, and
so in general,
Imo's is our option.
Yeah. So in general, the ones I've had around here where they're thin crust, and it's typically like the traditional topping seems to be like pepperoni and then like some kind of pepper. That is my favorite type of pizza. I don't know about the cheese. I don't know if those places were using Provel or not.
Sure.
And so that I did get emos last night, and I think they were talking about the Provel and complaining about it. And so
it is an acquired taste.
Yeah. So I will pick that though. I will.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put it in front of me, I'm picking that every time. And if you put that in front of me and Domino's, my brother, who we were having it last night, he would go for the Domino's. I'd go for the emos.
Same for me. So it's leave it on the tree for you.
So far,
Yeah,
because I've only had it from Emos,
Yeah.
and I did not like it. Leave it on the tree.
I mean, so even like Imo's has like Provel cheese that they'll sell, and I feel like it's Swiss and American blend is how it's made. And,
Artificial cheese.
okay, but and so I'm not gonna justify Imo's because again, like there are other regional pizzas and that are more universal than St. Louis style, and I'll give you that. I do like Provel cheese. Too much is too much, but yeah, Imo's is right. My best pizza is pepperoni, bacon, black olives, and green peppers.
Sounds good.
That's my
sounds
combo. And on an Imo's pizza, because like if you get things that are too chunky on a St. Louis style pizza, it's weird. But if you get the flat toppings, it holds its shape.
Yep.
You can taste everything, and then it's also like because Imo's is a regional franchise, not all of them are good.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Right.
That's fair.
Right.
So I'd still try it. I want
Sure.
to try somewhere else, but
Yeah, Alicia's is okay. I'm trying to think of like somebody else. So like Imo's is like
That's the bit.
Giordano's
Yeah.
of St. Louis style pizza, but there are kind of places in your neighborhood that do St. Louis style pizza.
Yeah. And so again, if Cyberg's, if it uses the right cheese, like I love theirs.
Yeah,
And otherwise, it seems to be the same.
sure. For instance, there was a place in Ferguson called Fortel's, but I didn't like Fortel's. Anyway, trigger. Well, I don't know if anybody in Ferguson listens to the podcast, but that would be like one of those things that triggered people.
Sure.
All right. You know what? And I always try to pick mine at random. Right for the picking, leave it on tree. Carpool karaoke. Now there's a show, carpool karaoke, but it could be that, but also just like a carpool karaoke
so just sing it along.
with people in the car.
People?
Yeah. Or by yourself.
Yeah, I'll pick that. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess depends who's in there.
I think you need to evaluate your own choices about why you're in a vehicle with them at that point. So I'm
That's
assuming
true.
it's good people.
fair.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm going to assume if I'm in that
Oh, yeah.
situation, I'm not in prison with
Sure.
people I can't stand or something.
You never know. Okay, yeah, right for the picking.
It's fun.
Cool. Yeah, right for me. I'm a shower singer. I'm a car singer. Yeah, it's all good. Paul, before we sign off, if there's one piece of advice you would give for anybody thinking about becoming a church worker, pastor, deaconess, DC, or anything else like that, what would your one piece of advice be?
You know, everyone says visit, so that's understood. So I won't use that one, but it can't be said enough. Visit. I wrote it down. So I'm trying to think to say it in a concise way. I think for me, and I don't know if this is the same, you have your reasons why you can't be a pastor. Like you're considering it, but you're like, I can't become a pastor because of whatever. So like, I think it's helpful if you list those things and work through them with someone. So like, really quick, the ones I had, being a student at a Concordia at that time, am I going to double my student debt? It was like, can I afford to do this? Well, obviously you work through that talking to people, not on your own. At that time, I was like, I don't know if I want to preach every Sunday. The thought of having to get up in front of people. Well, that's the pastoral formation question. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pious enough, all those things. Those are things you can work with through other people. So I think if there's reasons why you feel like you can't, don't let those be the reasons why you don't go, because chances are there are things you can work through with your pastor, with admissions guys, because that's what it was for me, was especially at the time there was an admissions counselor at Fort Wayne that he did a great job addressing. And he wasn't a money guy, so he's like, look, I can set you up with financial aid, but I'll tell you this, you're not going to double your student debt. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh. Suddenly a huge obstacle was gone. But if I didn't talk to him, I was just going to sit and brood on, oh, no, and student debt's going to just whatever. So, yeah, work through those can'ts if you have any can'ts about why you can't go to seminary.
Sure. Great stuff. Well, Paul, thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's great to have you both. Thank you for bringing Kati to join our team. Because, she's been an instant breath of fresh air and revelation, and a lot of things that used to be tough are easily doable. I don't know if Kati feels that way, but that's how it feels in my office.
For you, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and of course, everyone listening, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast, whatever platform you listen on, thank you for joining. And as always, if you're thinking about being a church worker, but you have a list of reasons why you think you can't, write them down, and then work through them with somebody you trust and who cares about you, because I think all of us had that list, and same for me, having somebody walk you through it, and when it becomes real and tangible and you realize that this is something that you not only can do, that perhaps might be great at doing, is just a great opportunity. And of course, come visit us. But if church work isn't for you, but you look around your congregation, you see somebody sitting in the pew, and you think to yourself, man, they'd be a good pastor or deaconess or teacher someday. Don't think. Make sure you tell them, because you could be that person who influences them to begin to pursue their journey, and have them fill out a request for information from us so that we can reach out and talk to them and find out who they are, so we can begin to walk through that discernment process with them. As always, like and subscribe, especially on our new YouTube channel, Concordia Sem Under the Fig Tree podcast. And as always, thank you for joining us under the fig tree. We'll see you next time. Take care.